even with that, I think that was helpful, just even for both of us to see, man, like it is kind of cool how like, you can increase income just by like approaching or working towards something from a different angle. And again, I think just like when you're working on research projects, right? Sometimes you need like a different angle or different thought process to kind of come in and be like, oh, cool, actually, I could approach this problem, look to solve this problem from this angle instead of just this way.
Welcome to the Personal Finance for PhDs podcast, a higher education in personal finance. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Roberts. This is Season 11, Episode 9, and today my guest is Elise Glickert, a fifth-year PhD student in organic chemistry at the University at Buffalo. Elise got married in the summer between finishing undergrad and starting grad school. Between their student loans and car loan, Elise and her husband were in about $85,000 of debt. With two irregular incomes, they quickly realized they had to change something to do more than just get by with their finances, and they implemented a zero-based budget. Elise compares long-term debt repayment with the process of completing a PhD. Both require a long-term mindset, creativity, discipline, and intentionality. Elise and her husband are now debt-free, planning their next steps with their finances, and expecting a baby. Speaking of the transition from undergrad into grad school or the working world into grad school, I am giving away an incredible resource for rising graduate students later this week. The resource is a live webinar on the financial actions that people who will matriculate into graduate school in the coming months need to take right now. It's really, really practical. We are covering why and how to right-size your housing and transportation expenses, budget and save up for your startup costs, and investigate your paychecks prior to receiving the first one. I'm really looking forward to sharing this material with you and hearing your questions and concerns. If you are headed to graduate school in the fall, you can register for the webinar at pfforphds.com/rising. If you're already in or past graduate school, but wish someone had sat you down to warn you about the financial pitfalls in your path to the PhD, please share the registration page with the rising graduate students in your life. Again, the URL to register for the free live webinar on Thursday, April 28th, 2022 is pfforphds.com/rising. Without further ado, here's my interview with Elise Glickert. I am delighted to have joining me on the podcast today, Elise Glickert. She is a fifth-year PhD student at the University of Buffalo, and we are going to discuss her financial journey along with her husband from when she started grad school to this year when she's nearly done, and it has been quite a journey. So I'm very excited to talk with Elise. Elise, will you please introduce yourself a little bit further for the audience?
Yeah, so what's up, everyone? Yeah, just like Emily was saying, I'm Elise, and a fifth-year PhD student at University at Buffalo. I do organic chemistry research, so that's kind of what I'm working on right now, synthesizing different compounds. And then primarily as well, the hope is with that to ultimately go on maybe into like academia, do some teaching or some like business type stuff. Especially like I tutor now. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that with like kind of like side businesses and side hustles as well and stuff. So yeah, it's exciting.
Okay, sounds great. Let me know, let's kind of take it back to the beginning of graduate school. I understand you got married right around that time as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So what was going on with your finances and also your understanding of finances or your outlook on finances at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so my husband and I, we got married in May of 2017, and we actually got married the day after we graduated, which I will say made finals week very, very stressful. Very, very stressful. Yeah, and so because it's like you still have all your tests and everything, and then also double checking, like, hey, is the DJ good? Is the catering? All this stuff. But it was also a lot of fun because we went to a small college in Ohio. And so it was cool getting to, just like kind of have like a final like celebration per se with all of our friends and everything. So that was really awesome. And then after that, we actually headed out to Buffalo. One of the reasons I even chose Buffalo or UB was because at the time when we had started talking about like getting married and stuff, I didn't really care where we lived at all. My family's originally from Jacksonville, Florida, and my husband has a lot of family in New York. We had some friends in like this New York area as well, and so yeah, so UB was one of the places I applied to, accepted me. And then yeah, basically after that, got married, graduated, honeymooned, and then headed out to Buffalo. And I started doing some TAing during the summer. And then my husband was also working in retail at like a Dick's Sporting Goods. So yeah, so that's kind of how we started with that. And then in regards to finances, I will say we are complete polar opposites. I'm a huge spender. Um, One of the like embarrassing stories I share is so like my senior year of so entering my senior year of college, I had this goal. I have no idea why. It's not even really that great of a goal, honestly, to just like blow $1,000 in a day. Doesn't and I was a college student. I didn't. I mean, it was bad. But anyway, so I did that, and then I hadn't actually read my like student bill correctly. So I didn't even have enough money. So I blew the thousand, and then like 3 days later, went into the admissions office and was like, "Hey, like, is there any way I can get more money? Like, I don't have enough." It was so bad. So very, very, yeah, very irresponsible. I would say was more of um, my mindset. And then my husband is, as a complete opposite, absolutely hates spending money whatsoever. So, yes. Yeah, that's kind of like again my financial background there. Yeah, I would say definitely no financial literacy whatsoever. It was just kind of like, yeah, as long as the bank account's not at zero, enjoy enjoy spending. So, yes.
Got it. And what about your like net worth or your combined net worth at that time? Did you all have debts? Did you have assets coming out of college?
Yeah. So we both had student loans coming out of college, and so I had around like 30,000 or so, and then my husband had around like 46,000. My loans then went into deferment. But for his, right, we were then like 6 months later, began making those payments, and then we also, in like the fall, so like fall of 2017, we then also financed a car. And with that, again, I will say I more so kind of led this as a spender, but again, something I would recommend not doing. I remember we both walked into the dealership, and I like told the dealer who was there, like the salesman, I was like, "Hey, yeah, so we're looking for a car. Our budget is 15,000, but we can go up if needed." So again, not the best, really just not the best lines to use there. So I said, yeah, I was super, yeah, not super intentional with money or anything. So yeah.
Okay, let me know about your incomes as well at that point. So, like, what was your stipend when you started grad school, and what was your husband earning?
Yes. So for me, it started out around like basically 26,000 a year, like 26,300, and usually that would be split up into like 23,000 the full like semester, both semesters, and then 3,000 during the summer. So or like 3,200 during the summer. So
Interesting. So, you would have to prepare a little. I mean, in
mhm.
theory, you could prepare a little bit through savings to supplement
Yes,
over the summer, but I'm
yes.
not thinking that was something that you were inclined to do at that point.
No, definitely not. Yes, I remember even when we saw this, you're like talking with other grad students. You see the forums and stuff. And yeah, I remember where both of us, as I said, since we were kind of more like opposite minded, there kind of started to be very much a man. We Something's gonna need to change, otherwise this is gonna be kind of disastrous, right? And even I know like one of the things that can be like one of the leading causes of divorce, right, is like financial issues, and we didn't want to have that. So yeah, definitely. Again, that kind of was what even really started, I would say, especially for both of us, a passion for finance was kind of realizing, man, we are gonna just like what you're saying, we're gonna have to start planning because like my income's a little bit irregular. And then, as I said at the time, he was working at Dick's, and so that was, I think that first man, like first semester or whatnot, the summer, again making like 15,000 or whatnot, and so 12 to 15,000. And then again, that was kind of irregular because he was working at Dick's part time and then also had like an internship um, as well. So that again was like part time. So not, yeah, we weren't bringing in a ton of money. I think those first 6 months gross was, man, maybe like 25,000 or so. So yeah. And again,
Yeah.
was all irregular, always irregular paychecks.
Yeah, so let's kind of talk through, what we have a good picture at the start. So let's talk through like how those next few years went and what you were learning and maybe what strategies or mindsets you started to use along the way. Because, we'll get to what the current picture is and it's a lot rosier than, what
Yes,
the
yes.
start was. So like, let's talk about that evolution.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, I would say the big thing for us was kind of a desire to make sure we were on the same page. Because I will say, when we did first get married, there weren't, I guess, like a lot of like financial stressors per se. It was just everything was very disorganized. But we weren't having like, I will say we were so blessed. We didn't have like any huge thing that kind of like came up or was like, oh no. It was like, man, we're a little disorganized and stuff. But hey, it's good. Life's good. Like, I'm doing school. He's working. And then again, I would say is the more so because our paychecks were so irregular, it was kind of like a man, we're going to need to be a little bit more intentional with this. And so that was when I started doing a little bit more research into just personal finances of like, hey, how should we like set up a budget? What's the best way to do that? And we ended up finding like a zero based budgeting type method. And so with doing that, it's kind of where you're like setting up, hey, at the beginning of the month, this is how much we're going to spend, which was really helpful for us, especially because of, again, that irregularity. We were then able to be like, okay, well, this is for sure, you know, like our expenses. And then, as even though the income's irregular, this is how we can use this excess. And then we also decided that it was like, hey, let's also look to start having some financial goals together. I will say we both do love setting goals and achieving them together. So it was also a lot of fun, kind of setting like one of them was, hey, let's become debt free. So again, let's be intentional with that zero based budgeting of how can we pay off our debt. And then also like getting a savings account set up, stuff like that. So I would say but the big start with that shift was really kind of like those, again, how irregular the incomes were and kind of almost seeing, man, if we're not intentional about this, like 5 years like sure, it's fine now, but like 5 years down the road, this would be just disastrous, right? It would not, because again, if anything comes up, like it's going to be really really bad because we're just not keeping track of everything well.
I'd love to talk more about the debt repayment goal. And so you mentioned that you both had student loans, but yours
Yes.
were in deferment,
Mm-hmm.
and you had the car loan. And so did you use any particular like methodology or like how did you decide what to tackle first or how much to pay? How did all that work?
Yeah, so I will say one of the big things, so we really liked Ramsey Solutions. That was again when I was doing like the basic Google search, right, of personal finance. I mean, one of the top things that came out, and they talk about doing like the debt snowball method, um, paying off just smallest debt, and it was fun to feel like all of those wins with things. And then this is interesting because like I would say at the same time as all this is happening, right? I'm also like progressing in my program um as a grad student, and it was interesting, I guess, kind of the similarities of I really liked the focus that like they kind of talked about of like delaying gratification. And obviously, I mean, that's 100% grad school, right? You're constantly delaying gratification. So I guess as my brain was already being rewired to some degree of going from, I would say, like my senior year, where it's just way more, kind of like, hey, whatever feels good right now, like let's just do it, to man, okay, let's put kind of submit to a process, get that, like I'm delaying pleasure, right? And then again, that intentionality. I would say that was kind of the big methodologies, but I'm not gonna lie, I don't actually know if I wasn't in grad school, like at the same time as we were doing this. That might have been honestly a little bit maybe too much of a rewiring all at once, but it was cool because, at the same time I'm running experiments and I'm learning, hey, this is what happens when this doesn't work. Then I have to come back in, or man, this is going to be like a 5 to 6 year journey, like my brain's already getting used to longer journeys than just, oh man, I can't like pay off all the debt in like 3 months, so what's the point? So it's just interesting, all the similarities there that I would say really helped both of us, especially as we were going about achieving those goals. But the big one was, yeah, just paying off smallest to largest. And kind of for us, it was realizing, hey, this is going to be, it's not going to be something that we finish in a year. But again, but it's like grad school also, right? Isn't something you finish in a year. So that it wasn't, it was difficult, but at the same time, I don't know, like obtaining a PhD is difficult. So I think it was nice to have like those similarities.
I love that you brought up this point because this is actually something that I bring up at the beginning of one of my seminars, which is the Graduate Student Postdocs Guide to Personal Finance. And so what I say, because I know that people who attend these seminars are not necessarily, like you are now, like super, a podcast listener would be like, oh, I'm super interested in personal finance. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to really dive in, they may just be like casually like, oh, I probably should learn something about money. So I'm going to show up at the seminar. So what I do to kind of like frame this is like, say you as a graduate student or postdoc, you have already made the decision to commit to this, as you said, 5-ish year, at least maybe 10
Yeah.
years training period to set yourself up for this wonderful, successful career at the start of that. And you making the decision to do that gives you certain like personality characteristics, like going through it, like you
Yeah.
were saying, like forward thinking, planning ahead, committing to a process. And that I say, if you take this sort of the personality that you're developing by being a graduate student, by being a postdoc, and you translate it over to the financial side of your life, you are going to be successful because it does take long-term thinking. It does take delayed gratification. You have to think about it as an investment in your future, whether it's debt repayment, saving, investing, whatever it is. It's all setting you up for an easier time in the future than you're necessarily having right now. So I really love that you clearly saw yourself going through this process as well. Brilliant. Well, I want to ask though about, regarding the debt snowball, which is a great method to use. How did you treat your student loans in there because they were in deferment? So they're a little bit different than the other types of debt.
Yes, 100%. So I will say with that, I should say, I guess maybe like a caveat should be we use like a debt snowball hybrid. Because yeah, because with the deferment, right, you did have the 0% interest, and um yeah, we basically, the way we did it was all, which I mean we just kind of thought of all of our debts as together, I will say, but I guess if you technically split them up, we paid off like my husband's loans first that were broken off into the like 3,000, 1,000, $2,000 chunks, and then did the car, and then did like the student loans that I had. But technically the student loans that I had were higher than like our car.
So it's sort of a combined avalanche
Hmm.
snowball method
Yes.
because of
Yep.
the 0% due to the subsidy and deferment and so forth.
Hmm. Yes.
Gotcha. And you mentioned also earlier savings. So how were you thinking about cash savings versus this big debt payoff goal? Like how much cash did you decide to keep on hand and for what purposes? How did you think through that?
Yes. So I will say we did use where for us we kept it at $1,000. I will say though also we did keep our expenses very, very low, and we were like pretty much every month. Again, once we started being intentional and doing that zero-based budget, we had usually like 2,000, 3,000 a month, or again depending on the year, and as I said, our incomes were irregular, but yeah, we had the 2,000, 3,000 a month, to kind of like, where like if something did come up, we would just take like a pause on the debt payment. So but we always had with like an emergency fund of, as I said, $1,000, again just in case, like because when we were looking at kind of like our lives, it was like, hey, the like worst thing that could happen would not exceed really like $1,000, honestly, because the biggest thing for us would have just been the car repairs, and we actually only had and still have one car, so it also kind of worked out that way. And yeah, most of our expenses, I will say, and even now, are like under $2,000 a month, so it also makes it again a little bit easier to with that intentionality of, okay, cool, well, I always have this amount of cash flow. And we did have later on, like in our marriage or whatnot, and in our journey, where technically I will say, which is bad on my part, but like I have actually totaled like two cars. So at that when that happened, like we did have to put press pause on it, and we're then like saving up money and everything. So instead of it just going to the debt, again at like 2000, or again depending on how the income varied, it would go into savings or towards getting a car.
I also skated through graduate school with $1,000 in a designated emergency fund
Yep.
savings
Yeah, that's
account.
great.
Because, I mean, the way that you described it was also sort of similar for my husband and me. Like, we were renters, we only had one car, not a whole lot of financial responsibilities at that time of life.
Yeah.
Now, I did have other savings and other, like, I'm really big into targeted savings accounts. So I had
Oh,
other
cool.
cash in other places that were like designated for car repairs or like other purposes. So it wasn't like that was our only cash on hand, but I like what you said because, you know, you had the $1,000 in savings, but every month, if something came up, you had $1,000, $2,000 you could devote to that new thing that popped up because you were cash flowing so much debt, you know, above the minimum payments every single month. So I don't know how much I'd recommend it, but I definitely see how you could, you know, get by with that. Were there any other like strategies or mindsets or anything that you wanted to share from, you know, that time in graduate school?
Yeah, I think honestly the big thing is just kind of what we've been talking about, just like the intentionality. Like I don't know, even I feel like just kind of when you're choosing a lifestyle, again, that's another thing that I think for us going straight from like college to grad school and everything, we didn't do a lot of like the lifestyle creep. And I will say a lot of that maybe I should probably should credit as well to like my husband, because as I said, he's way more like frugal than I am. But it is really nice, I will say. And again, this is kind of similar thinking to like grad schools. Like once you're in a process, it kind of becomes the norm, you know, and you don't even think about it. So even for both of us, it's like when people are like, "Oh man, you guys don't," you know, there would be times people would say like, "You don't have two cars," and it's like, well, you know, we have one, but actually we're like good, you know. But it becomes the norm. Or same with when I'm talking about like grad school to people, right? And you know, it'll sometimes you get the whole like, wait, you mean you don't just work like a 9 to 5 in grad school? And it's like, no, no, but it's like that's the norm for me. You know what I mean? So again, once you're in these process. I think it's just the same with personal finance. Like you really do get to set and determine to some degree, you know, hey, this is the lifestyle I'm gonna have. And I would also say with that, it also becomes harder if you like set a norm that's maybe a little bit higher that you can't maintain, because then you have to like almost rewire your brain, which is one of the huge benefits. Again, as I was saying, I think of like being in the PhD program and also the personal finance journey, because there's just so many similarities that can really, really assist you.
I agree. Emily here for a brief interlude. If you are a fan of this podcast, I invite you to check out the Personal Finance for PhDs community at pfforphds.community. The community is for PhDs and people pursuing PhDs who want to take charge of their personal finances by opening and funding an IRA, starting to budget, aggressively paying off debt, financially navigating a life or career transition, maximizing the income from a side hustle, preparing an accurate tax return, and much more. Inside the community, you'll have access to a library of financial education products, including my recent set of Wealthy PhD workshops. There is also a discussion forum, monthly live calls with me, and progress journaling for financial goals. Basically, the community exists to help you reach your financial goals, whatever they are. Go to pfforphds.community to find out more. I can't wait to help propel you to financial success. Now back to the interview. You mentioned earlier that you were tutoring. Like, how did you supplement your stipend? I guess I'll put it that way during grad school.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. So I will say, yeah, so for us, again, as we were kind of on the like our debt repayment journey, you know, there kind of starts as you're like going. It's like, man, like, what are there any other things I can do to like speed up the process? Again, similar with like grad school, right? Sometimes you might have weeks where it's like, man, I'm going to put in more time, or okay, I'm going to not do this because I want to, you know, I'm so close. just got to push through. And so that was kind of how that started. And then I was looking for different like side businesses or side hustles and things to do. And during the pandemic, actually, we did a little bit of like DoorDash, you know, just because you're like in your car and just dropping off. I mean, it was great. You just pick up the food, drop off the food, and then like wave to the person from your car or whatnot. So super safe and everything. But and so doing that, it was kind of like, oh, this is cool. Like we can supplement income, doing this. And then also, as I said, our incomes have always been very irregular. And my husband, after working in the retail, then went into more of like sales, which was still making around like a 30, 35 or so, again, depending because it very irregular. But even with that, I think that was helpful, just even for both of us to see, man, like it is kind of cool how like, you can increase income just by like approaching or working towards something from a different angle. And again, I think just like when you're working on research projects, right? Sometimes you need like a different angle or different thought process to kind of come in and be like, oh, cool. Actually, I could approach this problem, look to solve this problem from this angle instead of just this way. And then with that, so then it was like, man, I'm doing all this stuff with organic chemistry. And so what would be a good like side hustle I could do that's more related to organic chemistry? Because obviously DoorDash is not really related to organic chemistry at all. And I had always tutored like a little bit, but it was more so like I would help out like like tutor some like high schoolers at like church or whatnot. Or there'd be someone would recommend like, hey, can you help this student? I'd be like, yeah, sure. But then I use a platform called Wisant. And so I started doing that last year, actually, and it was awesome. It was I think really, really cool just because I loved it because I love being able to teach. I love being able to talk and like communicate with students and explain concepts. And it was great too because it's like an online platform. And I feel like, obviously everyone has different like opinions and stuff about online learning, but I think a lot of people have really gotten used to it as well. And so it's also really cool because this platform is just great. And the students, like, they're great, as it's just awesome being able to like teach and communicate again, that one on one. Yes, it's just been really, really awesome. And it's been great too, because then I get to do like organic chemistry on the side, which is also what I'm doing in lab. So I think that's been really awesome.
Another tie-in with what I teach in many different venues, which is if you can somehow employ the specialty that you're developing in graduate school in some other arena, you're probably going to get paid like at a better rate than, one, staying inside academia, like, maybe tutoring at your university, and also, or just trying something totally different that doesn't use that skill set, like you were saying with DoorDash.
100%.
Can I ask what your like pay rate or how much you're earning like monthly is from Wisant?
Yes, yes. So, in general, which I will say I started it last year in June. So it wasn't actually a huge part, honestly, even of like our debt free journey per se. But yeah, I make on average is around like 1,000 to 1,200 a month from it, and then I charge with it like $50 an hour for the tutoring, and usually it's like at the college level, and then there's a couple of students in high school that I tutor as well. But yeah, it's awesome because again, and just like what you were saying, and even like some of like the articles and things that you have posted as well, right? It's also nice because to some degree, right? Especially with the like you're becoming like an expert, in a field, and so it's very, very helpful for me. Just and honestly, just continuing to, man, make sure I'm really communicating well. And then also it is great when, they can both kind of coincide. 'Cause like I do, organic chemistry at work, and I can come home in the evenings, for like a couple hours or so, or during the weekends for a couple hours. And yeah, it's really, really nice. And then I will say it does slow down a little bit, like in January and then December as well. Just because not as many students are taking classes and stuff during those times. But yeah. So far it's been really, really great, and I've really been enjoying just the one-on-one tutoring and mentoring with students.
Yeah, that's a great pay rate. That's a great addition to your budget. I mean, you're on the order of magnitude of like a grad student paycheck. I mean, you're not quite there, but it's the same. You're in the
Yes,
neighborhood. So
yes.
that's awesome. Give us an update then on how, like, what your finances are like right now. We went over at the beginning of graduate school, the various debts that you had. What do your finances look like now? We're recording this in January 2022.
Yes. So now, we're 100% debt free. So got rid of all of that, the 85,000 like $500. And as I said, that was a process, right? The 47 months paying that off. But again, like grad school is a process too. So I think that's one of the cool things about processes is like all the stuff you can learn about yourself in them. Um, and then right now we're working on increasing just like our emergency fund. So as we were talking about like 1,000, it's fine for like in my opinion anyway, it's fine for a starter emergency fund. However, it's really I would not recommend, spending the rest of your life with a $1,000 emergency fund. And especially we have a baby coming, so that's really that of course changes things where it's like, yeah, $1,000 isn't, we don't want to have that for like 20 years. But yeah, so we're looking to increase that right now to which would be like 4 to 6 months for us, which is like $10,000. Just have that nice and set up, and that should be set up in like early March or whatnot is when we should have that. And then right now, after that, we're gonna start investing. So we're gonna max out 2 Roth IRAs. So just kind of again, which that's a way longer process, but I'm just getting that money saved up for retirement. And I think for that, I'll be using Fidelity, and then my husband as well, who set his up either with Fidelity or maybe Vanguard, because he works for Geico now. And so with that, I think they have Vanguard. So yeah, we'll see with that. And then our next goals, we're not 100% sure what like the next 5 years will look like for us. And so we're also in the process of, we'll look to get something, once our daughter is born, we'll look to get something set up for her for college or just future educational goals. We're thinking of, it'll probably just be, we'll just set up a 529. In New York has some nice like tax benefits when you set up a 529. And then, yeah, and then it will be like saving up for a house. Right now, our goal is to buy a house in cash because, again, with the current lifestyle that we have, as I said, it's less than 2,000, but we are very content with that. Obviously, when our daughter is born, that will increase. That will increase a little bit, but yeah, we think we can probably cash flow because, again, my husband's income continues to go up and my income hopefully, by December will also go up beyond the graduate stipend. Cash flow hopefully around like 30,000 or so a year, and we're hoping to then buy, I don't know, maybe like a condo or townhouse, or single family, again, depending what, where we go, for like maybe 120,000 or something like that. So we'll see. Yeah, but that right now is kind of the plan with everything. And right now the biggest focus is just getting that savings increase from 1,000 to or like I think right now it's like 1,800 to 10,000, and then yeah, getting those Roth IRAs maxed out.
I really like it actually when this point that you volunteered to do this interview at, this point of we just became debt free and now we are ready to start these next steps. I love it that we're talking right at this point, because whenever you have someone like you who's gone through this very intense, very intentional debt repayment journey, you get all of your, systems and processes and the mindsets, everything set up so that you're cash flowing above your, your expenses, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month. And it's all been going towards this debt. And now you get to the point where you get to switch it, and it's like this massive, amount of cash flow. Like I think of it as like a huge like fire hose, like, I get to direct to other goals. And I love that you have this like order. Okay, first is the emergency fund, Roth IRAs, 520, you have your priorities set out. So absolutely love that. It's very apparent, these last years have been preparing you for this state. I also want to add that I went through, again, the exact same process when we were pregnant with our first child, that I was looking at that $1,000 emergency fund going, not going to cut it anymore. And I think our goal is also something like $10,000 or $15,000 as that next thing to do, like before the baby comes.
Yes. Yeah.
Which turned out to be very useful. I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about that. Are there any other, you just mentioned sort of long-term financial plans and of course getting the emergency fund together, but are there any other specific financial preparations that you've been making or thinking through for your baby's arrival? Like, I don't know, like health insurance or childcare, like these other leave, what other sort of major financial things are you working through right now?
Yes. No, that's a great question. So, I will say, in regards to like preparing for our daughter and everything, the big thing was I got to have a fun time. Actually, yeah, both my husband Kyle and I, but kind of doing stuff where, like reading those actual like health insurance statements. Not gonna lie, when I first got to UB, they gave me the handbook, and I was like, okay, cool, thank you, and then did not even glance at it. And so, but just making sure that we know, like, hey, this is like our deductible This is the amount we'll be expected to pay. And it's actually kind of cool. I will say I have been very blessed. Like the lab I'm in, there's actually like three other students who have also had kids as well. And so for them, it's also nice because, we all technically have the same insurance. And so, yeah, and UB, I will say, does have pretty good health insurance as well. So it's nice. So we're, of course, planning for that, where it's like, okay, cool, we should, that'll cost us like $200. And then, you have all the visits as well, which we, again, since we do the zero-based budgeting, we just budget for, of like, okay, cool, this month, it's going to be this much for these visits. And then, everything else in regards to just like kind of preparing for like stuff and everything that is has more so come from just kind of like asking other people in our lives, and also just like other grad students, hey, like how much do you find yourself like spending for diapers? And I will say also there is a lot of information that is online as well, so it's kind of like using a mix of like the online plus like what our friends are actually just telling us that, hey, this is how much I spend for this, which has also been super super helpful. Or like, hey, you need this, this is the cost of this, and just like adding all of that up with like car seat, yeah, cribs, all stuff like that. So that's good. I would say that's been kind of how we've been primarily preparing financially for that. In regards to leave, I'll have 3 months of maternity leave that I'll be taking, and then I have, yeah, kind of like a fellowship that goes through that. And then so that's kind of something like, again, me and my boss talked about like maybe a month and a half ago or so, just about, hey, this is kind of like the expectations there. And then
So that's paid, just to be clear. That's
yes.
a paid leave.
Oh yes, 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 yeah, yep.
Fantastic.
Yes, yes. So I would say that is a nice thing again about like every state's different, but like New York does have that paid family leave. And then my husband as well is going to be taking because that's yeah, he's working for Geico now, so they do paternity family leave, or like paid family leave as well. For him, his is a month though, is what. Yeah, right now we're planning on for him. And then yeah, so that's kind of, I would say those are the big like financial preparations we're doing. But again, it is something that, especially, I don't know, when we first like kind of found out, I just like Googled like how to prepare for a baby, and it's amazing how like just many articles and all this stuff that comes up, and it's also different again based on the insurances, which I'm sure even right? Like there's just so many different variables. So I think it's very helpful. At least for us, it's been very helpful. Like just talking with other people, talking with peers, talking with people from church, talking with people from our places of employment. Yeah, and just like to get that information.
I agree. I think those, especially your lab mates, same insurance, same advisor, like
Exactly. Yeah.
been through it recently, like that's going to be the absolute best resource. Yeah, definitely. And I asked about childcare earlier. So do you have a plan yet for after your leave ends? What's going to go on?
Yes. Okay. So I will say for that plan, we will, yeah, we'll kind of see. Because right now, again, I don't think so. We don't have like anything against daycare or anything like that. Like I think, and UB's daycare actually is supposed to be like fantastic. Again, like all my two of my coworkers use it, and they've been very very pleased. For us though, right now, so since with and again, we don't know what everything will happen with the pandemic, but so my husband technically he does work from home right now. And then for me, man, I'm just not 100% sure if I would just, maybe just have a weird schedule as opposed to like putting our daughter in daycare. Because one of the things, my boss, obviously he wants us to make sure like we're getting our research and everything done. But with organic chemistry, there's a lot of stuff where it's like you set up a reaction for like 6 hours, or you set up a reaction for 4 hours, and then you're like doing some writing stuff and like research stuff. And so for me, yeah, I think right now the plan is kind of where it would just be, I would just kind of have a schedule set up of like, I'm just going to be in lab at weird hours, like from 8 to noon, and then maybe come back from like 8 to 10, or, just weird scattered hours. But we'll see. That could also, we could also start that, and then a weekend, I'm like, this is terrible, and it's like, okay, well, she's gonna go to daycare. So it'll kind of depend too. I think that's another thing with even talking with people in regards to pregnancy. Right? It affects every woman differently, and so yeah, I can't. As much as I love to be a planner, sadly, I can't plan out exactly. This is how I'm going to feel 100%. So yeah, but right now the plan is just I would just have kind of weird hours and just stagger things. And again, with that, at least right now, it doesn't sound all that bad because again, it takes again it'll take a lot of intentionality. I would have to like schedule things out, but yeah, I think it would be fine, but we'll see. We will see what happens.
I will recommend for you, in case you haven't listened to it or any other interested listeners, the interview I did back in season 1 with Dr. Heather, because she talked about when she had her first child at the end of graduate school, similar timing to you, how she and her husband set up a overlapping, we're providing our own childcare schedule.
Yeah.
I think he
Oh,
was
awesome.
teaching, actually. He had like an visiting professorship, something like that. So like you said, there was some work that could be done from home. There was some work that had to be in person for both of them, but they just kind of worked out the schedule so
I
that,
like that. Yeah.
they could each be with their child. I will say that since then, I believe all their children are in all the daycare and all the preschool, like as much as possible after they got out of this grad student phase. But that's what they
Yes.
did for kind of the finishing up of grad school, like period. Yeah, so that's a really, really interesting interview if that's kind of your like philosophy and the approach that
yeah.
you want to take. And it's actually a little bit similar to what my husband and I wanted to do as well. So awesome. Well, Elise, this has been such a delight to chat with you. Congratulations on becoming debt-free. Congratulations on the pregnancy. I'm so excited to kind of see where your new financial next phase of your journey takes you, because like I said, you have all these goals and you're really ready, right, to tackle them. So it's awesome. I would like to ask you the question that I end all my interviews with, which is, what is your best financial advice for another early career PhD? And that could be something that we've touched on during the interview, or it can be something completely different.
Yes, yeah. So, I would say, yeah, the biggest one I always recommend is just to do a zero-based budget. Again, you can also budget, right, where you just kind of look at the end of the month. But I just think, especially, even honestly more so, when you're working on like a stipend, just get into the habit, because again, you're already learning how to be intentional anyway. So just go ahead and get into the habit of with finances as well. Hey, this is how much I'm gonna spend. In each of these categories, or whatever stuff you have set up, is how much I want to save. In our case, it was like paying off debt, and then building up savings and investing stuff. But again, whatever your financial goals are, like it's just so much. I feel like, yeah, just so much easier and so much more helpful when you just zero base budget it. And it also, just like again with grad school, as you like are disciplined and are intentional, your confidence grows. And so I think that's another thing too, where it's awesome to, be confident as you're like doing experiments and stuff, but also confident in the way you're handling your money. And when you're able to create a plan, and then, it doesn't have to be perfect, but then able to like achieve some of the things within that plan, it's just awesome. Yeah. To then be able to grow that confidence. So for sure.
Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Elise, for joining me for this interview.
Yes. Thank you, Emily. Thank you so much for having me on.
Listeners, thank you for joining me for this episode. I have a gift for you. You know that final question I ask of all my guests regarding their best financial advice? I have collected short summaries of all the answers ever given on the podcast into a document that is updated with each new episode release. You can gain access to it by registering for my mailing list at pfforphds.com/advice. Would you like to access transcripts or videos of each episode? I link the show notes for each episode from pfforphds.com/podcast. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here are 3 ways you can help it grow. 1, subscribe to the podcast and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or whatever platform you use. 2, share an episode you found particularly valuable on social media, with an email listserv, or as a link from your website. 3, recommend me as a speaker to your university or association. My seminars cover the personal finance topics PhDs are most interested in, like investing, debt repayment, and increasing cash flow. I also license pre-recorded workshops on taxes. See you in the next episode, and remember, you don't have to have a PhD to succeed with personal finance, but it helps. The music is Stages of Awakening by Poddington Bear from the Free Music Archive and is shared under CC by NC. Podcast editing by Lourdes Bobio and show notes creation by Miriam Ock.